Hi, I'm Anne. Welcome back to my video, and today I'm going to be updating you on all the books that I've been reading for the Around the World in 80 Days Readathon. So currently, as of when I'm recording this video, I think we should be on Singapore as the week. So let me update you on the books that I've read. I've read 4 books for this readathon since the last time I've updated you. Also, if you can hear my dog going crazy, it's because he is. Where was I? So let's just go through all the books that I read. So first we've got Yemen. So that's the first book that I read, and I read The Fox Hunt by Muhammad al-Samawi. And this book was exceptional. So Muhammad was this young man who grew up in Yemen in a very conservative Muslim family. And so he was taught both in schools as well as in his home to hate Jewish and Christians. He becomes interested in school with Christianity and with Judaism. And so at one point he runs away from home to go to like this Jewish Muslim relations conference. He goes to a few and he makes some friends there, and so the first half of the book is very much about his explorations on religious tolerance, understanding different religions. And it's not like he's never thinking of converting. It's not a story of conversion at all. It's a story of religious tolerance and learning to live together even though you don't necessarily agree on religion. And I think that's a beautiful message. The second half of the book takes a completely different turn. It's very much about Muhammad's escape from Yemen during the civil war. What was very sobering to me is that this story of his escape from Yemen and his coming to America, immigrating to America, took place in 2015, which is crazy to me because I was attending community college and I was maybe 20, 21 when he was across the sea going through all of this. So it's crazy to think how modern these civil wars and these extreme hardships, where he would be crouched on the ground, bombs going off around him, wondering, oh, am I going to have people burst into my apartment and shoot me? And here I am across the ocean, going to community college, living a completely relaxed life, still living with my mom. It's just crazy to think that people are still in such warlike situations, even in the modern day, even though we think in many ways that we've moved past war, we really haven't. So it was a beautiful book, and especially in the second half of the book, documenting his escape. It's very much not just his story. It's the story of several people, most of them Jewish people, who he met in these conferences, these Jewish and Muslim conferences. These young people help Muhammad escape from Yemen, and they do basically everything they can to get him to America. So the first half of the book and the second half of the book, while they are both his story, they are drastically different tones. And I love this book. I ended up giving it 5 out of 5 stars. So I was super happy that I was able to read it, because I would not have picked it up if I wasn't trying to find a book that just happened to be set in Yemen. So if you guys have not read this book, I would highly recommend it. It's absolutely a beautiful book. And then we moved to India, and I actually got a little bit discouraged with my first read, so I didn't end up reading a second read for India, even though I did have the time. But I did read the Bhagavad. I did read the Bhagavad Gita. I didn't realize this when I got it, but it is very much so the Bhagavad Gita is itself taken out of this larger Hindu religious text. To be honest, I didn't care that much for the commentary that this religious leader gave. And someone in my comments made a brilliant point, and I actually looked it up, and I completely agree with them. This was made by a man who had a certain ideology. And it would be like if you wanted to read a Bible commentary and you read a commentary by a Baptist. That commentary would be very different than if you read a commentary by, say, a Catholic or by a Presbyterian. Because while we as Christians in general tend to agree on the majority of things, there's certain things that we differ on that would drastically change how you perceive and comment on Holy Scripture, on the Bible. So similar to that, this author is very much, he has a certain lens that he looks out on. And because of that, he not only translates the text in a specific way, but his commentary gives a very specific lens. And while that would be brilliant for someone who knows the basics of Hindu faith already, who's exploring further into different types of Hindu ideology, I think they would love this book a lot more. But for me, who is coming at it from a very Western perspective, first of all, and a very more Christian perspective, I found it very challenging to not only try to understand the Bhagavad Gita, but also differentiate what the Bhagavad Gita is saying with his commentary and what he is saying. So I ended up actually switching to audiobook eventually. I found a translation by Sir Edwin Arnold, and he published his translation in the late 1800s. So this was long ago. And I actually really enjoyed his translation because very much he was coming from it. I think he was British. He was coming at it from a British outside perspective, which was kind of the perspective I need because it looks at just the surface of Bhagavad Gita. And I think in order for me to fully understand it, I would need to study it a lot more. And I probably just don't have the time. I would love to, but I just don't see myself. So this one, I wasn't a huge fan of either the translation or the commentary, but I do enjoy the Bhagavad Gita. So it's hard. I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. Because the Bhagavad Gita itself is really fascinating. It is a discussion between Lord Krishna and this prince, this Indian prince, right before this battle is about to start. And this prince kind of goes to Lord Krishna and he's like, okay, what do we do about this? How do we do this? How do we see war? So he's asking his advice on all these different topics. And Lord Krishna goes through and just talks to him about these things. And I think that was so fascinating and so interesting because even though certain things I would say Hindu and Christian faiths deviate on, for example, the idea of reincarnation and your soul being reborn again and again in different bodies, I would say for the most part, Hindu faiths and Christian faiths agree. And so it's really interesting to see the commonalities that my faith and Hindu faith has. So I really enjoyed the book, not so much this specific translation. I probably won't keep this copy, but I will probably want to invest in the future in another shortened copy. So the next book, I actually went straight to Singapore because I was like, I need something light, something that is not super dense. Aunty Lee's Delights by Ovidia Yu, and this was fun, but I had some slight complaints about it. So Aunty Lee is this middle-aged woman. She's a recent widow who lives in Singapore. She runs this little cafe, and she is just an amazing protagonist. She's this perfect combination between a little bit nosy, but also very comforting and kind. And that's my favorite type of middle-aged amateur detective. Think of Miss Marple or Jessica Fletcher from Murder, She Wrote, the TV series. And she has this Aunty Lee has this perfect middle ground between detective and just this sweet older lady. And the mystery, there's this weird disappearance of these girls. Some of them, they're found dead, some stuff going on. There's a lot of mystery. You have this drama between Aunty Lee's stepson as well as his wife, kind of being not always the nicest. So there's a lot going on. The thing that I struggled with the most is there's quite a few stereotypes in the book. So there's a very brimstone type Christian who despises gays and very stereotypic type Christian with no nuance as to understanding. Yes, there are a minority of Christians, I agree, that do think that way, but they think that way for certain reasons. So I think a lot of the nuance was lost in the book. And there's a lot of that was just the stereotype that stood out to me the most. There's quite a few other stereotypes that the Karen type individual, the daughter-in-law of Aunty Lee is was very much a stereotype, and I struggled with her character as well. So there were certain characters in the background that I just didn't like how they were portrayed. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, but it was perfect to come off of the Bhagavad Gita, because that is a very dense religious classic, and this one is like a very light, fun read. So I did enjoy it. And I have another book that is coming, but I don't know when it will be coming, and the Singapore Sapphire by A.M. Stewart, which I believe is also a like cozy type mystery, but it is historical. So I do want to read that if it comes in, but for now I think I'm probably going to be moving on to the next country, which I think is China. So I finished Aunty Lee's Delights, and that's the book technically that will count for sure for Singapore. I may end up reading the second one as well. And then I also ended up reading the actual book of the hour, Around the World in 80 Days. I actually listened to this on audiobook for the first time. I read this book, I think now 3 times. The first 2, I read it in 2 different copies too, I'm pretty sure. And then the third time, this time, I listened to it on audiobook, and it was such a cool experience. And if you didn't know, it's all about Phileas Fogg, this posh British gentleman who decides to make a bet at his very posh, again, English club, and his bet is that he can travel the world in 80 days, and he will win, I think it's £20,000 or something around that. So he's betting like his entire fortune basically on this trip. And he goes with his faithful servant, French servant, Passepartout, which is an amazing name. It's interesting because I remember growing up with the 2005 movie version, and that one is very different than the book. But it's funny to like compare the differences. So yeah, it's good. It was a great read, and it was also cool because I just finished The Fox Hunt set in Yemen, and even though it doesn't actually mention Yemen in here, it mentions Aden, which is the like capital city of Yemen. So it's really cool to say, oh yeah, I know where we are, even though I didn't know that this city was part of Yemen before, but now because I read The Fox Hunt and I'm reading this, I actually am able to relate to it better. So it was cool, especially since now I'm getting to the countries that I'm very familiar with, because all we have left is, I think, China, Japan, the USA, and Ireland. Ireland is the last one. Those are all the books that I've finished for Around the World in 80 Days Readathon. Next, I will be going to China, and I'll be reading some books set there, and then to Japan, and then across the ocean back to the US. I'm having so much fun with this readathon, but I know there is about a little bit over a month left, and I'll probably finish it technically before the readathon is supposed to end. Which is good. It gives me a little bit of leeway if I want to read some extra books that are set in different countries or something like that. How is your reading for this readathon going? Are you following like week by week, or are you jumping around? It doesn't really matter. There's no extreme rules to this readathon. It's a very relaxed readathon. Even if you just want to pop in for like 1 week and then not read for the rest of the weeks, that's fine too. So let me know how your reading is going for this readathon. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a great day. Bye.